back to Square Quan podcast. Today is a very special episode because we have one of New Zealand's most premium powerlifting coach, um, Jason Clarke, representing Auckland APA, North Shore Barbell. And Jason is also both Chung and I's coach. So he has the pleasure or the displeasure to handle kind of like our powerlifting programs. So yeah, I said a little bit about you, Jason, but whatever I left out, maybe you want our audience to know a little bit more about you. Feel free to share a little bit more about your background. How do you end up doing powerlifting coaching? I know that you had some kind of like history in rugby, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about like your current career and stuff like that.
Oh, firstly, thanks guys for having me on. Much appreciated. I'm looking forward to listening to some of these episodes. I'm sure the Quans will be doing a good job of it. So yeah, I am, I guess, a full-time powerlifting coach, if that's a real thing. But yeah, that's what I do as a job. Also am a part owner of North Shore Barbell, which is a powerlifting. Yeah, it's a powerlifting club. I almost said powerlifting and strength club, but it's basically just a powerlifting club on the North Shore in Auckland. I am a part owner or a co-owner in that with Joel Lata, who I think you guys mentioned you might get on here at some point.
We will.
So stay tuned for that. So yeah, that's what I do. Basically, predominantly coach online, but coach people in person as well. And I've been doing that full time for over a year and a half. So like as my sole source of income. But outside of that, I've been coaching powerlifting I guess in a paid fashion since about 2017, probably late 2017. So still fairly new to the game, but I've been lucky enough to take on a decent amount of clients in order to sustain an income in this high rent North Shore living. So yeah, I originally like I'm been working in the fitness industry since I was 20 or 21, so almost 10 years now. I'll be 30 this year. RIP.
The big 30 mark.
RIP to my 20s. Yeah, no, don't talk about it. So yeah, I started off just working in the gym, basically working on the desk, taking people through programs, and then evolved into personal training. At that point, I was like, man, I don't know anything. Can I swear in this, by the way?
Yes.
Or is that advised against?
Feel free to swear all you want. We'll put the explicit on the episode.
Basically, I was like, I know fuck all. I need to go and study some of the shit. So I went and studied and only really realized that I know even less than I thought I knew in the first place. So that's what a bachelor's degree does to you. Basically just poses more questions. So I basically worked as a personal trainer and studied at the same time. And then once I graduated, started the coaching business and was doing a bit of both personal training / working in a gym and coaching, and then just kind of worked my way into full-time powerlifting coaching. So I've been in the industry a while. I guess like almost 10 years is not too bad considering a lot of people don't last in fitness.
Yeah, I think the average, I don't know, like I think the average is sort of like 6 months, a year, I think. At least
for personal training,
especially. Yeah, at least for personal training in New Zealand. So, I mean, you've been in it for a while, so surely you're doing something right.
I haven't really ever had another job apart from like I delivered pizzas and I worked in a bar for a couple of years.
There you go. Clearly, he's doing something right.
So some might argue that's much more of a real job compared to what you're doing right now.
I think that is very true.
Definitely harder.
Definitely. Well, I guess, being a coach yourself, there's obviously a lot of controversy, especially you jumping on as a coach in this era where essentially information is always going to be quite overloaded, especially in social day and age of social media, Google, and all that kind of shit. And I'm sure that especially the clients or athletes, as we like to call them, that you coach, let's just say that they aren't your regular personal training folk. You know, we, or at least myself or Kedrick, are one of those examples. We would go out of our way to find information that might help us to eke out certain performance improvements, even if it's 1%. And I guess my question here for you is, on some cases, and I think I remember this very clearly, this was last year when coming off nationals, my pick wasn't in a very right place. And I think you gave me, I can't fucking remember, pin press or some shit. And I said, Jason, look, I want it to do tempo bench. And you said, yep, if that helps with your pain, go for it. And I'm sure you would have this conversation with a lot of other clients as well. So I guess the question here is, you know, where do you draw that line in the sand to allow your clients' inputs to influence the way you coach or the way you program? Like, because obviously we know that there's a right way and a wrong way. Well, I say that context. There's a better way and a shittier way. But maybe the clients pitch a shittier version of it and say, I think this will work. How do you go about that as someone who works with this level of clientele?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think my process there has definitely developed over time. Initially, like, you'd write something up, you build a program, you're very proud of this program, and then you kind of pose it to the client or the athlete, as you call them. I don't refer to my clients as athletes, by the way. I coached rugby league for like 6 years. Those people are athletes.
Hey,
yeah.
Well, so it's a sport. It's a sport.
I mean, like, define athletic. But anyway, yeah, that aside, yeah, basically you would like I would kind of design it, and then the person would come back to me and be like, I really hate this exercise. And I'm like, but there's like so much theoretical underpinnings as to why I put this in there. Like, I really think it's going to help. And then they'd be like, no, I fucking hate it. And then, like, my ego would be like, I hate you. Like, just do the damn exercise. But I think over time, I kind of actually just got sick of having the argument. So I was like, sweet, whatever. Fuck it. You can do whatever you want. Go for it. I don't think we should do this, but let's do it instead. But I think, like, you know, in a more serious note, like, I think there is a pretty big benefit to allowing that level of autonomy from the client. Like, you got to put it in context though. Like, if it's like, oh man, I hate doing front squats, because everyone hates doing front squats, and they're like, can I just do leg press instead? I'm like, okay, well, I think you should be doing front squats because maybe there's a little bit more postural gain that we can get from it. But at the same time, while we're still working the legs, working predominantly the quads. So is there going to be a massive benefit from doing front squats over leg press if they really just don't enjoy it? Like, is that enjoyment that they get from doing the leg press over doing the front squat, does that outweigh the potential theoretical underpinnings of why I've prescribed the other exercise? So it's like, sometimes I'm like, no, that's a dumb exercise. Like, we're not doing that. But a lot of the time it's like, okay, maybe have a conversation of like, why do you think you want to do this instead? They're like, well, it hurts my wrists and, you know, hurts my clavicle, and, you know, it just basically feels like it's suffocating me. And at that point, I'm like, sometimes I'll be like, try it. And if they come back and it's like, nope, still hate it, then it's like, okay, let's just try this instead. And then they go, oh, thank you. And then, you know, all of a sudden, enjoyment level is higher, buy-in's a little bit higher. They kind of feel as though they have to push on this exercise because they've been gifted it. And I think you just probably get a little bit more out of it. And I think, yeah, like, the crux of it for me is like, are we going to get, and I think, you know, in reference to your example, pin press over tempo press or tempo bench, it's like, they're very similar. You know, it's just a variation at the end of the day. So, you know, you've got to really outweigh, is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? And I think a lot of the time it's not. And, you know, that, I guess, kind of actually comes back to like personal training in a sense. Like, is it is it worth them hating training to persist with this variation? Probably not. I don't know. Like, I would be interested to hear how you guys would deal with that situation.
Well, I guess for myself, it is quite easy to kind of evaluate, especially using proximity from competition uh, as an indicator. So I would say that, yeah, if competition is coming, right, I would at least want you to perform the competition movement with some frequency. I'll be quite hard pressed to say, cool, I've not even do the competition squat at all in my entire peaking block and go into competition, right? That doesn't mean that every single training day has to be a competition movement. If it's further away from competition, I tend to give the athlete certain autonomy. And like how you mentioned, autonomy can be important, because what the only caveat I would tell the athlete is that with autonomy comes responsibility, which means that you said you want this exercise. I want to see you put effort into it. I don't want you to be that kind of athlete where you just said, I'm sick of doing this. I just want to try something and just muck around. And literally every single week you come to me with a different variation. I'm like, dude, if you want to do this, I'm going to give it to you, but you got to show me that you are going to work hard with this exercise. I think that sometimes people, like you say, people can get really caught up on like, cool, I need to force this athlete to do a certain movement. And behind, like, if I would also try to read between the lines on why this athlete, like you said, doesn't like the movement, have that conversation with the athlete. uh, Perhaps, like I said, maybe the athlete isn't performing it, he or she doesn't feel like he's moving enough weight on it because the exercise is so self-limiting. So I said, cool, right, maybe we can keep it in, but we can put it on like your tertiary squat day. It's not your primary, not your secondary either, right? You can be one of those days, whereas you can push the other two squat days, things like that. So I think that there are strategies to kind of like speak to the athlete. And what I have done successfully in the past as well is to use another variation that is similar, but the athlete is kind of find it a little bit more palatable, right? And then slowly progress that athlete towards that exercise that you think has that theoretical underpinning behind it. And yeah, it's just like uh, giving a variation that's similar but not as punishing for the athlete by itself. Yeah. So
or what you can do is, if they don't want something like a front squat, you say, okay, you can do front squats, or you can do something worse. And then they're like,
Yeah, you
okay,
can. Yeah, you kind of like psychologically like anchor front squats
Yeah.
to something like, I don't know, fucking 6x12 on belt squats or some shit.
Second tempo squats.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's a lot of, I guess, like that also comes down to how much buy-in we want the athlete to have, right? Like, I think I'm currently reading a book. It's called Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew. I think that's how you say his last name. That's a really good book, by the way, guys. Like, if anyone wants to read up a little bit more of the sort of the art of coaching.
I only
Coaching.
read Star Wars novels.
Yeah, I do that on the weekends as well. But I digress.
Only science fiction.
Only science fiction, of course. Foam rolling. We'll touch on that a little bit.
only science fiction sounds like West Side Barbell.
Oh yes, yeah, but it's a good segue because here we go.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. We're gonna get sued. But things like West Side Barbell, right? Like, I think like everyone goes in the West Side Barbell thing, they're like, oh shit, like 2-inch board press, and like there's some people who really like it, and some people who really, really just, for the love of God, like hate it. I personally fucking hate it, to be honest. But I get like athletes coming in, or I get people telling me, oh, like I really like this variation, even though it's literally like a 1-inch range of motion, and I think it will help my bench press. And I feel like that is some level of like self-SIBO into thinking like it will help them. I'm like, if it's not too close to competition, I'm like, cool, let's potentially chuck in like a 2-inch or 3-inch board. But then we might program like another day where you're just regular benching. And if we kind of see that your regular bench doesn't go up, but we've added a 2-inch board. Maybe it's because like you are doing a fucking 2-inch board. It's not really helping your bench. And then the next cycle, you'd be like, okay, we'll take the 2-inch board out. We'll do close grip, whatever. And all of a sudden your bench goes up by like 10 kilos. You're like, well, lesson learned there. You wanted to try something which I let you try. I gave you that autonomy. Clearly that didn't work out. Let's try it our way, or well, my way. Let's see how it goes. I think like there's always this fine line on like getting them to buy in. And I think it's sort of that line where they cross, where they realize that they're not I hate to use this phrase. It's not that they're not as smart as they think, but sometimes it's like, even as coaches myself, like myself and Kedrick, right? That's why we have Jason, because sometimes we tend to overlook things that we think are good for ourselves. And we kind of think like, oh, this is really good. But then we don't have that third person view. And I think having someone in your corner is always going to be very beneficial to give that perspective on like, that shit's just not working. I'm going to be very honest with you. Like, let's try something else.
I think like as a coach as well, you do need to be receptive and like open to those things actually working as well. I've had instances, and I'll give you an example. A guy, actually I'll name him because fuck it. Sean, I coached Sean King, a guy that trains at North Shore Barbell, and he was doing like deadlift stance box squats, which is an exercise I would never go anywhere near.
It sounds very,
and I was
it
just
sounds
like,
very
he was like,
anti-Jason.
yeah, exactly. But he was like, bro, they work. They're like, I've done them before, and like, I really want to put them in the program. And I was like, you know what, fuck it, we'll just give it a crack, see how it goes. Like, he's not gonna hurt himself or anything. And like it actually seemed to work pretty well. Like, bearing in mind we don't do them anymore, but like at the time it was working. And whether like that's because they were working the same range of motion as a deadlift, but with the bar being on axially loaded as opposed to being in your hands, and maybe you can theoretically move a little bit more weight and a little bit more legs, who knows. Like, at the end of the day, it fucking works. So we did it for like 12 weeks, and I was like, okay, well, that worked. Now in my arsenal of exercises for Sean, there's that exercise. So like, just because I didn't think it was working or would work, like, it doesn't mean you completely write it off. And like, because you can look at any program and be like, oh, it was probably this, not the deadlift stance box squats. But we saw a progression, and I had to be like, okay, I eat my words a little bit. You were right. They seem to work.
Yeah, I think that is kind of like having some humility as a coach, instead of like, dude, I am the premium coach, I know it all. I do think that there is a give and take with your with your athlete or the people that you coach. Although I've heard like some horror stories where, I mean, I work for like TSG, and I've heard the stories, I've not experienced it, where literally the person, all he wants is for this coach to be his coach by name, but literally wants to write the program by himself, and essentially have the coach oversee it and sign, like, so-called sign it off. Like, I mean, you have that kind of athlete, and then those are like, yeah, that athlete is probably a little bit on the far end. I probably wouldn't want to coach someone like that. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, TSG just dropped him as an athlete. The person shall not be named, but I guess we all can, yeah, if you try to look back a little bit on the social media and stuff, people might figure it out. But yeah, if they do, good on them. But I do think, coming back to the conversation, you having that ability to communicate with the athlete is like super important, because I think that when you speak to the athlete and say, oh cool, tell me why do you think this will work, right? Or help me understand your thought process. I guess for myself, I tend to be a little bit of a coach where, like, if I have an athlete that I have coached for a while and he or she comes to me with absolutely ridiculous idea, I like to push back a little bit. So to quote an example, I had an athlete, I said, cool, right, we're doing a volume block, and this athlete says that, oh, I want you to increase the load a little bit more because I feel like I haven't been hitting any PRs. And I said, what? This is a volume block. So I said, you should probably, and we are preparing for comp, by the way. So it's not like we can just max out anytime we want. But I said you should hit some volume PRs, right? Then I said, so what's a volume PR for you? And he said, oh, cool. I did 535 pounds for 4 on a deadlift. Then I said, yeah, cool. We're doing sixes now. So I said, if you hit around 515 around for 6, that will probably, it might exceed 535 for 4. Then I said, dude, I already hit 515 for 6. They said, yeah, I know. So isn't that a PR? And I said, nah, it can't be a PR because it's too easy. I'm like, since when does hitting a PR need to be hard, right? Like, I'm like, so if I ask you to run 5K before your deadlift and you hit 515 for 6, but still pull it, but at a much higher RPE because you ran, would that be a PR then? Because it's more difficult, So like, I like to try and challenge the thought process of an athlete, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's good, and not everything has to be hard all the time. So I guess like my question for you is, you did mention sometimes you just can't be bothered and like, yeah, just do what you want. But have you ever had athletes where you can like really challenge them or at least change their mindset? I think that some of my athletes that come to me, especially the ones who are younger, I said that, cool, my role as a coach is to help you be a bigger athlete. I'm not trying to be a psychologist, but sometimes a lot of the things happen in the change would need to happen in your head as well. So I would probably challenge your mindset. So my question for you is that, when do you decide whether you want to challenge an athlete's mindset when it comes to training, or when do you just let them be?
Well, I think what comes to mind probably even before that is it's really important to ensure that you sell the structure to the athlete. Damn it, I said it, to the client. So when you are preparing a new block or when you are outlining a plan, I think it's really important to show them why it is this current structure, why we're doing this, and sell it to them. Because if you don't do that and you don't kind of explain it, then I feel like that is when you are more likely to get pushback. Like if I'm just to, say, I'm just going to email you your program. Hey mate, here's your program. And then, that you're doing 5 sets of 8 on Monday and then 10 sets of 8 on Wednesday. And you're like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, there's no explanation around it. So I feel like when you have a good level of explanation, buy-in through that explanation, and I guess conversation around why you're doing something, you're probably less likely to get a level of pushback, because they can see, okay, we're doing this because we want to achieve this. So I can see how that would get there. To answer your question though, I think it actually kind of comes down the same sort of route. Begging people to try things. That's probably another thing. Like a lot of people are very sold on them only being able to do X or Y, or, maybe they've done this exercise before that has caused them an injury. And you're like, I think this is a valuable exercise. Let's just try it again. When they're like, no, it's going to injure me, and we know a certain exercise isn't going to injure someone, as long as you're not just going straight into maxing it out. So I think, just being like, hey, let's just try it out, see how it goes. Because once again, you need to exercise a good level of humility, because maybe doing whatever protocol that you're doing, it might not even work. So if they are right, then that's once again where you need to check yourself and be like, okay, maybe we should be doing a little bit more what they want to do. I actually had a good example of that with a woman that I coach, where she was adamant that she should be kind of, well, she didn't really necessarily say it like this, but she was very adamant that she should be benching at a higher intensity and benching at a higher volume, and basically just redlining the bench a little bit more. And I was like, you're going to fucking like this. And she kind of showed me what she'd done previously. And I was like, this is a gnarly ass program. And we had a little bit of an off-season period. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's give it a crack. And she's gone great ever since. And now we basically run like RPE 9s or 8 to 9, like on 4 bench days per week. and like slow bar speeds and everything. But she's been doing it for like well over a year now, and she progresses and never has any issues. So I'm like, well, that's just an outlier. So she wasn't wrong in that. And it's, you could say, oh, well, maybe if she did a more optimal program, maybe she'd get more gains. But if it's working, you're going to stick to it. And, it could be working because that's physiologically what works for her, or that could be working because she is so bought into the idea that works, that psychological benefit actually carries over to the physiological benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like, especially when we get like a new client or coming off a major comp prep, going into quote unquote off season, or something which typically us powerlifters hate, aka volume or not lifting heavy. I think it's very important for, well, at least to some degree, for the coach to kind of switch on that salesy, like very salesy approach, and like try to really sell that idea of like, cool, we've done the work, you've peaked, you've PB'd, but I think it's going to be more beneficial for you to do this. And like you said, Jason, it's all about the buy-in. If they don't buy into the idea of the structure or the program, that's where I think a lot of that pushback in a more negative way. Like, I don't think pushback is bad. Like, it just means that the athlete is learning to be a bit more autonomous. But I think where if they don't get that buy-in, that pushback is going to be very much more of a negative type of pushback. And then it just fucks everything up. I think you probably have experienced this in the past. Like, I'm sure, well, I have. I'm not sure about Kedrick, but I've definitely experienced where I don't give them the appropriate level of buy-in. They're like, sweet, they go do it. They're like, mate, like, this is shit. I'm like, but it will work. They tell me no, and then it just goes downhill from there. And it's like, okay, cool, let's scrap that whole idea. Let's come up with something new.
Yeah. But you need to have that ability to be like, okay, shit, that didn't work. Let's move on from it. Because if you haven't created that buy-in, then it's like, okay, well, we need to figure out what you feel as though you should be doing and maybe make like a nice little happy medium there. I think it's the same thing. And I don't know about you, Chung, but I'm sure Kedrick's experienced this in the past purely because of like the prestige around TSG. It's like when you sign, Jesus Christ, what am I talking about? It's like fucking NBA. When you
sign up to the
client,
team,
when you sign a new client for $1 million, no, it's like when you get a new client and like you don't really change that much. And I could see this happening with TSG because they have a very very elaborate like spreadsheet and system. So you give it to this person who's probably already pretty strong and probably in a good place to make gains anyway. And then, 4 weeks in, they're like singing your praise and they're posting on Instagram being like, Kedrick TSG is a fucking magician. 4 weeks and my squat's gone up, 20 kilos or whatever. And it's like, because it's happened to me before, and maybe not 20 kilos, but you know what I mean? People that I coach only go up on the bench anyway.
True.
And like,
true.
And like you're sitting there being like, man, I really didn't do much at all. I think you just, you maybe saw a coach you liked, you took to that, and you liked the system. Your coach gave a fuck. They cared. I think that helps a lot. And, that was just kind of this, like, I guess, nice little mix of things just to put you in a good position to make progress. I don't know, Kedrick, what are your thoughts on that, man?
100%. I think the biggest thing is it's nice sometimes to be able to take credit, but I guess, like you said, on the social media, I'll take whatever credit I can get. It's good for business, but deep down inside, it's like, cool. Like, yeah. So sometimes it's not even all that magical, is you have the athlete believe in your training. And I think being a coach who care, like you mentioned, is critical. You can write the most elaborate spreadsheets, but if you cannot send the program on time, right, no matter how sophisticated, or let's say hypothetically, if this athlete performs everything to the T, this athlete would like gain 15% on the lift, no matter, and even if that results is like guaranteed, but if you can't send your program on time, the athlete's trust in you as a coach would diminish, and the athlete will be like, yeah, this coach probably doesn't even care about me anyway, so I'm just gonna go in the session and not really care. My coach doesn't care, why should I? I do think that having that mindset going into training wouldn't be beneficial. So for myself, like, there are certain things where I do as well, I cannot explain what's happening, and most of the time I would just like to say, right, my easy answer is like, cool, maybe your fatigue is less, right? That's why you're performing much better now. You're like in a less stressful state of life. If I cannot explain something that is on my end, I would just attribute it to their end, because they would ask me, why do you think this is happening? And I don't want to say that this is a magical formula that will work every single time. So I said, perhaps maybe something is going on in your life that's really good, and the last time when we were doing something, or when you with the previous coach, you were stressful. I think the outside factors for training is plays a huge role, and people often do not give it enough attention, right? I mean, training is like, what you spend 2 hours, sometimes if you train like a real powerlifter, 4 hours in the gym.
I think I worked out the math before. It's like, in a week, if you're training like 4 times a week, 2 hours a week, that's about 5% of your week.
Yeah. So like, if you really can look at the outside factors, and I think a lot of time that outside factor will be the athlete. It depends as well. For me, there are certain athletes that they want their program. I have an athlete that where he asked for his program in advance, right? The entire block. But I told him that I don't coach this way. I give you a week by week. And then when you give me a feedback, I change it and make the progression weekly. But the athlete, just for his own sake, he said he wanted the whole block. I said, cool. Are you fine if it's just me sending you the same thing but in different color? Because TSG, we have elaborate colorful spreadsheets. That's it. Then he said, yeah, sure. So I literally just sent him the whole thing, and everything was the same. And maybe the accessories, I just like progressed the accessories across 5 weeks, but the main lifts was literally like the same load or the same RP, because I don't know what to change yet. And the athlete be like, yep, cool, right? And the athlete, after a while, the athlete said, oh yeah, this is all good. And the athlete made good progress, and I also think that my role as a coach is also to kind of like help the athlete grow. If I think that this isn't the mindset the athlete should have, I'd be like, so you've done it your way, right? Are you open to try it my way? Just like a little bit, just a sprinkle, and if the athlete says cool, and if the athlete is making progress, and the athlete might come back and say, oh cool, I never knew that this could actually work, or I didn't know that not being too obsessive about my training would actually bring me more gains, because like all this like obsession outside training, I mean, come on, we're powerlifters. We don't make a living doing this, like you shouldn't really obsess so much about your powerlifting training. And sometimes it's way more detrimental to your gains than you think, when you're just stressing over something that actually doesn't require as much stress. Jason, you and I, we had this conversation before, and I think pertaining to our initial, like the start of this episode, we talk about like how long someone can be in the game, and I think what you will notice as well is the people that are really like obsessive and like, I need to be this at this age, I need to lift this X amount of weight, they usually don't last long in the sport. Whereas like, for some reason, like people who are mediocre, no offense to all those people out there, I'm one of you. We just like, I've been training for like, I
think we all fall into the same boat. Maybe just below average, actually.
Between the three of us, Jason, would you agree that Chung is probably the highest level lifter here, right?
I was about to say that. Yeah, I think Chung's got me on
really
good lift points. I could bring that up actually.
I think the only reason I've got you in good lift points is because I've competed a little bit more than you. Because I think Jason,
my good lift points are about to go down.
I think Jason, in the past 2 years, the amount of competitions Jason and I combined is still less than you, Chung.
Yeah,
definitely.
Actually, I can take that back. Yeah, because I do at least like 2 a year. So
Yeah. So like you see, I mean, I've been lifting for nearly a decade now. I'm not I'm not the greatest lifter. I just benched 140 kilos last week, and that's 12 and a half kilos increase in like 2 years since I got to New Zealand. And I mean, I some people are like, oh man, 12 and a half kilos in 2 years. What lousy progress you
I'm like,
have.
man,
I'm
that's
like,
awesome.
yeah, I'm like, dude,
I'll
take
take
it,
that.
I'll take it,
I'll
And
take it.
I guess
Just for clarification purposes, my good lift points is higher than Chung's by
See, I told you.
or mine is
Pretty.
87.7 or 87.69. Nice. And Chung's is 85.38. And I
There
won't
you go.
embarrass you with yours, Kedrick.
yeah, it's probably
There you go.
below 80. So yeah, we'll keep that information a little bit.
We'll keep that locked up.
Yeah, but yeah,
Anyway, I actually yeah, sorry, go on.
I mean, I said like my question to you is also like, how do you manage your athlete's expectation? We talk a lot about managing expectation as part of like longevity in the game. I talk about that 12 and a half kilo bench press in 2 years, and 12 and a half kilo extra in 2 years, not benching 12 and a half kilos only in 2 years. That's quite sad. But how do you manage your athlete's expectation? Let's say if they go into a meet and they're like, Jason, I want to hit this amount, right? I want to do this, and whatever they've done in training hasn't even reached close to that. What do you do then?
Yeah. I haven't really mentioned this too much to people, but I actually have kind of a different take on the whole longevity and sustainable training argument, or it's not really argument, but topic. To be honest, like if someone came to me and they wanted to train the house down, I would say to them, okay, how long do you reckon you've got? Like, how long do you want to be in the sport? I would like, I've never really had to have this conversation, but if someone said to me, you know what, I just want to fucking go nuts for 2 years, and then after that, I don't really give a shit, I would be more than happy to oblige with that. I'd say, well, if you go too crazy, obviously I wouldn't program anything that's like too ridiculous to the point where they would regress. But I think this topic is really interesting because everyone thinks everyone wants to powerlift forever. And like, actually, we're having this conversation in the gym tonight, and Will was like, "Fuck, I don't want to lift as a masters." And like, to me, that's
Will
fine.
as a masters,
like,
Jesus.
yeah. But everyone has this like long game, which is completely fine. But not everyone wants to powerlift forever. So like, people look at, say, someone on social media, and they'll go, "Oh, like he's just fucking pushing the boat out every week, and like, in 3 years, I'll like to see where he is." Or they refer to someone that has maybe dropped out of the game a couple of years ago, and they'll say, "Oh, well, look where he is now." It's like, well, maybe he just wanted to do 2 years of powerlifting. Like maybe that wasn't his forever hobby, which is completely fine. I mean, how many hobbies have you picked up and fucking dropped off in the last 10 years anyway? I mean, for me, I want to powerlift long term. Like it's my fucking income, so it kind of helps. And I love it, and I have ever since I started doing it. But some people, they may say that, but I don't think they really want to. But if someone flat out said to me like, "Hey, man, I don't want to, I just want to go nuts and see what I can do," then I think that's fine. Like you don't have to do it forever. But just to kind of like answer your question in terms of getting people a little bit more in line with like sustainable training methods. Yeah, I think you just got to kind of sell like it's an interesting one, because the thing is with powerlifting, and kind of contrary to what I just said, is like the best way to get stronger is probably not just to absolutely flog yourself. So some people were like, "Nah, man, like let's push." And I'm like, yeah, but like just pushing and going mental doesn't actually kind of is not that conducive to actually getting stronger. So kind of wrapping their heads around that is important. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that in terms of like sustainability and people that just want to go like I think we as a community run off the assumption that everyone wants to do it forever. And I'm just like, what? Like, are you sure? Like maybe some people don't want to do it forever.
Yeah, I mean, like I have a few clients who are powerlifters, but I also have clients who aren't powerlifters, and I kind of always tell those who powerlift, because it always appears that they're the ones who are more, quote unquote, for better or for worse terms, focused, or, you know, they check in, they're more responsive. And I'm like, in the end of the day, like, if we take powerlifting away, what are you as a human being? You know, like, and if you can't answer that question, or if your identity is I am powerlifter, and to the day I die, then I think from a longevity standpoint, that wouldn't be very healthy. Because what
What if they
happens? Yeah.
what if they say to you, look, I just want to go full noise powerlifting. I want to live, breathe, eat, sleep this shit for 2 years. Like, what do? Like, what? Like, are
It's
you
fun.
all
It's
good?
funny.
Like,
It's
I don't
funny
know.
because
I'm
I
all good with
actually,
that. Are
yeah.
people all good with that?
It's funny because I actually had this conversation with someone exactly today, and they were like, "I want to powerlift for the next 6 months,
Good.
and I'm going to go back to bodybuilding." I'm like, "Cool," but I also
Yeah,
want to know, like,
that's all good.
then I'm like, "That's all good," but I also want to figure out, like, what is your purpose, I guess, like, or like, what drives you to continue to pursue going to the gym and, you know, lift weights and try to be healthy and, you know, like, just be good. Like, if you can't tell me the underlying reasons of why I do that, then I, you know, like, I wouldn't want you to use powerlifting as your main source of escape from reality. Because I think
Mm.
a lot of people get this idea like, oh, I'm hardcore, I bleed, I sniff ammonia, like 2 hours in a gym. This is, you know, my time. I'm gonna get on the bar. I'm gonna die under the bar. I'm like, cool, awesome. But what if you don't die under the bar? What happens then?
Yeah.
It's like, then it's that question, like that internal debate of like, oh shit, like that is one part of, I guess, one's identity. But I do feel like when you're a quote unquote, again, mediocre powerlifters out there, if powerlifting is the big bulk of your identity, and you have to question that, am I world class? Chances are you're probably not. Because, and again, honestly, if you need to ask yourself, am I world class? You're probably not as a powerlifter, because, you know, some people are just genetically born to powerlift. And some of us, like, well, all three of us, we do it because we enjoy it. We know, well, at
Yeah.
least I know I'm never going to be world class.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it regardless.
I guess like to tie it back in, and I'll be quick here so you can talk, Kedrick, but like to tie it back into like your question, Kedrick, and kind of going off what you're saying, Chung, is like, I feel that you can kind of get a sense of the people that want to sense for the people that want to do it forever and they want to do it because it's their outlet. And maybe some people just want to go NATO with it and be the best lifters that they can. I think like in terms of finding a sustainable approach and just kind of conveying training and feedback to those people who you are more like, this person's going to be here for a couple of years and then they're going to give it up, because you can just kind of fucking tell with some people. I think the way I phrase that and like just the general buy-in to the training process with them is completely different to someone who I'm like very
100%.
aware that this is their outlet, this is their hobby, and like this is what they do to get away from their family, and like this is what they do to have like downtime. The conversations with A person and B person are so different. And I think that's kind of like, maybe that's where I was going with that whole kind of delineating those two people. And I think you would approach both those people in
Very
many
different.
different situations in a different manner. Yeah. Because you can't just sit there to the guy that's he's 19 and he's actually maybe like a 90 good lift points lifter and potentially going to win nationals, and be like, hey man, we just need to like pull it back. I just want to kind of maybe drop some sets, maybe drop a day of training, because we want to like, I want you doing this for the next 20 years. And he's like, man, I just want to win,
I just want to be world
So
champion.
I think like some people some people go under the assumption everyone wants to lift until they're 50. And I think the way you approach both those two people is going to be quite different, to be honest. And it's funny because like I'll say something to one person and then I'll say something to another person, like a different kind of I guess mental approach or something like that, and then they'll talk to each other and like, hey, but you told me this. Yeah, and I'm like, oh well, that's kind of, you guys are kind of different.
Yeah, that's why I write different
so, yeah,
programs for
I don't
you
know.
and them. I'm not giving you the same thing.
Yeah,
That's coaching, right? So I guess the way I do it is just ask the athlete what the goal of what your goals are. I think it's, for me, it's as simple as that, and I would help you reach your goal if I think that goal is something that's not like bad. Like, I wouldn't, if this guy literally say, oh dude, I want to go in and lift this weight so that like these 5 girls will sleep with me, and I probably wouldn't coach you, like that, because
that sounds awesome.
I mean,
like, everybody have their, like, let's just say it's like massively conflicting with my principles, right? Or like,
yeah.
dude, I'm gonna like do this and then take all the roids, but like tell everybody I'm an IPF lifter, that kind of stuff. Like something that goes against my principles, I probably wouldn't coach them. And but other than that, I'd say like, cool, if this is your goals, right? And if you want to do it long term, this is how I think we can do it long term. So if then they have pushback, and then I'll just ask them, is this still your goal, right? Is this still your goal? I just would remind them and ask them, are your goals still the same from when we started? And if they said yes, that's it. If you said yes, then this is the best approach. If you say no and you think this is your last rodeo, let's go out with a bang. Let's just do what we can, and then I just say, cool, right? We're going to push you really hard. So that there might be a higher probability of just because, like, yeah, there's a lot of big increase in training load and all of that. There are certain consequences that I did not account for. Are you okay to bear those consequences if it happens? And if they say yes, then I'll say, yep, let's do it. I think as a coach, my role is not to tell the athlete what to do. If the athlete doesn't want to do powerlifting anymore, I mean, I have had athletes where, like, really successful, right, really good, and then decide to switch sport completely. Sure, that like, I'll be like, oh, what, people out there will be like, yeah, what a waste, haven't you told the person that this athlete's like really great? I said, yeah, but at the end of the day, if the athlete doesn't want to do it, he's not going to be great anymore, because he or she comes in with no heart for that. And my role as a coach is not to force you to do something, especially when you can't put, and especially when it doesn't bring you money. It doesn't like feed the
It's
family.
not their job.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not their coach in the sense of like, you need to get the most out of them to make revenue.
Yep. And
not like a professional sporting situation.
Yeah,
100%. So I guess in that sense, we talked a little bit about sort of like challenging the athlete, and then, right, like pushing them to go beyond boundaries, and we also talk a little bit about holding them back. And I think all of this is very kind of like important and when we mention longevity, it's quite hard to not mention about like health and injuries when it comes to lifting. And I think this is a particular topic that Jason can probably go on till like 6 a.m. tomorrow. So
probably.
And I know that, I mean, I wouldn't call yourself a contrarian, because at least not, I think in the evidence-based field, or at least a scientific field, you do adhere quite well to those guidelines. But I think to the lay person out there who is a little bit more like basing their pain or their injuries based on their personal intuition, you might seem like a complete contrarian. And it might sometimes also seem like, oh, this guy just wants me to do this so like he can continue coaching me so he can make money. I'm not saying that is the case, or I'm not even trying to imply that you have had athletes that make that sort of accusation. But maybe you can share a little bit, share your thoughts with us in terms of like athlete injuries or personal stories that, I mean, you don't have to name names, but personal stories of how the athletes you've coached have gone through injuries. How have you approached training an athlete through phases of injuries and stuff like that? I mean, I sustained an injury myself during competition while working with you. If you want to share that as an example, I give you full authority, and I won't sue you if you use my name. So
it's on record anyway. So
yeah,
I'll pay you out, mate, for being a pussy. Nah, so I kind of like, I've got a bit of a story here with this. So like, there's, I guess, a journey somewhat to like how I came about the current views that I have. And it's funny because like, you know, like I say a few things here and there, and like Kedrick said, I literally speak more so to the evidence than anything else. So like, I think like you kind of see that and people think, that's not what I'm used to. And they're like, this guy hates XYZ. But anyway, I'll kind of go into like a bit of a story more than anything. So funnily enough, and this is something that I am not proud of, but back when I first, I'm not proud of this, mate. But when I first started working in the fitness industry, this is just wondering if this is before power. Yeah, this is definitely prior to powerlifting. Like I was all for passive modalities of recovery, like massage.
I can see where this is going,
foam rolling,
people.
yeah, cupping. I literally bought a box of foam rollers, and I distributed them. Like I was selling them to clients and people that I knew because I thought they were the best thing ever.
Foam rollers. So
yes. Good. I even bought a cupping set because, you know, I was into that shit basically. So basically like that's what was happening. I had these like little ball things that like, it's like a hand massager, like and you kind of roll it on your legs and stuff, and I guess it kind of works in the same sort of sense.
Yeah, like this old folks ones. But yeah,
and I thought that was the shit, man. I was like, yeah, these like people are going to buy this. Everyone's going to be injury free. This is the best thing ever. And then I actually, because I was into that shit, I actually did my like at AUT, you do like an end of year project. So I was working with New Zealand Rugby League as like a placement. And then you have to kind of implement a sort of project alongside like I don't know, it was like a 15,000 word paper about this project. And the project that I did was like based around recovery. So I was like, okay, look, we're going to, you know, put together, because the idea was to put together like a resource for league players so that they can utilize certain recovery methods. So obviously being at uni, I had to actually search and find some efficacy for these modalities. So I went on the journey of kind of going through that, and like I started searching recovery modalities, and like everywhere I went, it was like, this is no stronger than a placebo. This didn't help recovery. And like the things that were working were like active recovery and what do they call it? Like the repeated bout effect. So basically kind of doing the same exercise in terms of recovery. And like, I was like, what the fuck? Like this stuff doesn't work, like according to the literature. And I'm like, well, why is there such a high, like systemic use of these things, like in a like sporting, or I guess just general setting, like a physiotherapy setting? And I kind of read more into it, just was very confused at the time. Actually ran into the concept of acute to chronic workload ratio, because there's actually really good research in that, which a lot of people probably heard of. In rugby league, that's kind of one of the places it started. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and I was like, this actually seems like it helps. So essentially, like if you don't know what acute to chronic workload ratio is it's basically the amount of training or efforts that you're doing and where that compares to like what you have been doing in a little bit more of a chronic sense. So the classic measurement there is like calculating how much work you do in a week and comparing it to the prior 3 weeks. So if that week that you did is way higher than what you have been doing, then your chances for injury increase. And if it's way lower, actually your chances for injury increase as well. So you need to find this like sweet spot where it's not too much higher or too much lower than the prior 3 weeks training. Like the 3 to 1 week thing is just arbitrary. That's just what they did to try and find an effect. But essentially you don't want to be ramping up training intensity or volume too much too soon, because you can, or dropping it off massively, because you can end up kind of injuring yourself. And I'm sure you can understand how that stuff interplays. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole a bit more, and I was just like, man, like all these things that I've been doing haven't been working. So I literally stopped doing all that stuff myself personally. Stopped doing the foam rolling, stopped doing the cupping, stopped doing the massage, and funnily enough, things like started hurting less. And like obviously that's a anecdote. I understand that N equals 1 in that setting, but it was kind of in line with what the literature was saying. So I was lucky enough to go, like I found a very good, I guess, mentor in this area. I don't really like that word that much, but a go-to guy who would train at the gym that I worked at, and he was very like clued in with this sort of stuff. And basically he would train at the gym that I worked at, and I would pest him for like my whole shift, and he would get no training done, and we would talk about this stuff like for hours on end. And like, he was like, yeah, man, that's just like what the literature says. And I was like shocked. I was like, how is this what the research is saying, yet clinical practice and things that personal trainers etc are prescribing are complete in the opposite. Like I understand, like if it's a placebo, like that's fine, it works, but the narrative that people kind of sell with that is like, it is doing XYZ. And to be fair, once I kind of read that stuff, there was a lot of like light bulb moments where I was like, you know what, like the reasons why I've been told that these things work, they've always baffled me. Like I remember I had acupuncture done once, and I won't say where I got it done, but the guy, I was like, okay, so like, oh yeah, you're putting needles in my ass. Like I was like, okay, well, what's actually happening here? And like the like physiology spiel that he went on for like 5 minutes, I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Like I have a basic understanding of physiology, but I was like, how does that even work? That's like, you just kind of confused me with physiology terms as opposed to like actually answering my question. So like there was like a light bulb moment where I was like, you know what? Like now that I think about it, it actually makes sense that these things don't like physiologically do much. Like, you're not actually breaking up the muscle tissue, because that was the whole thing, right? People like think you foam roll and you kind of break down the muscle tissue or whatever the fuck it is. And like, you think about it, like once you read some of the literature, how you can't actually just break it down. You're like, actually, that makes sense, because if you went and ran into someone in a game of rugby league, you would probably die if a foam roll is breaking down your muscle tissue. So yeah, I guess like I just was kind of like, holy shit, like that's really interesting. And why don't people know this? Because, once again, working in rugby league, I came from a place of like, after a game, it was hot colds. Before a game, everyone's before a game, everyone straps up their shoulders, their ankles. There's strapping tape, and I was always like, why the fuck are we putting tape on people? Like, to me, that doesn't really make sense. Like, what's tape going to be doing to help someone? So I guess it kind of confirmed my bias in a way. Like, I strapped people up for years, and I did all that sort of stuff. We did massage and hot colds and things like that. But I was always kind of like in the back of my head, I was like, I don't really get why we're doing this. Like physiologically, it doesn't make sense to me. And then just like reading the literature, it turns out, a lot of it isn't physiological. It is sort of more mental and placebo-like expectancies from that sort of stuff. So that was kind of where I got with it. I know that's a big tangent, like I said, but I think that needed to be said.
He needed to get it off his chest.
Yeah, and ever since then, I guess I just kind of challenge like norms about that sort of stuff. Like, and I think like I try to do it in a positive way. If someone comes to me and they're kind of saying, oh, I need to foam roll, or else they can't get under the bar or something. Like, I don't just be like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. Why are you foam rolling? It's like, okay, like what makes you think that? Like how come you think that? Have you tried training without a foam roller? And like, how did that go? And I think like, I can't even remember your question, Kendrick, but I think one of the things that I try and like my kind of, I don't want to say goal, but like my bias is towards increasing people's self-efficacy. So they aren't reliant on external implements to help them recover. Like, I want people more than anything to understand that they can get through these things, these pains, these injuries on their own. They don't need an implement to be able to quote unquote fix them. Yes, going to see a physio is fucking great. If you've got a good physio, go to them. And, if they're going to talk you through it, like I have great physios that I refer to, like the guy that I talk about, he works at AET, refer people to him all the time. Jenny Dewar down in Canterbury, Cam Andrews, great physios. Yes, they utilize some of that stuff, but they understand it. I think that is good to have a relationship with someone like that, but also going through your training experience, your pain experience, and understanding that, like, hey, I don't need XYZ to fix me. I can actually get through this. My body will kind of fix itself. Like if I manage what I'm doing and kind of learn from where I went wrong, I can actually get through this. And I think that's what I would love to do. And, it's worked for a lot of people I know. People start foam rolling, they kind of get over it and then doing all that sort of stuff. And then they kind of realize that, they don't need to worry about that stuff too much. And it actually kind of falls in with what you said, Kedrick, around just not stressing about things outside of training, because then, you don't realize that you don't have to foam roll 45 minutes every night before you go to bed. Yeah. And it can actually, and then you can just chill out. You can play video games or you can hang out with your dog. These are things that I do that I could be foam rolling, but now I get to do instead.
Well,
so anyway,
said.
Big tangent, but
yeah,
self-efficacy is key. People need to trust their bodies.
100%. Well,
I don't know. What are you guys thinking about that from an outsider's perspective?
Kedrick, you go.
I mean, I have a similar story as well. I used to be one of like those on those bandwagon, becoming a supple leopard, Kelly Starrett, whatever,
Good old Kelly Starrett.
This is really selling myself here. I had a subscription to Ability Wad. Consider that. I
was too cheap, so I just bought the book on Amazon when it was.
You bought? I don't want to say how I got it, but yeah.
I was like on that side of the fence as well. I guess for me, it's like my approach for all the people I coach is like, what do I do for warm up? I'm like, cool. We have like TSG. We have this library of warm ups. It said if you feel tight, just like maybe you sit down the whole day, just like do 1 or 2 drills. You shouldn't be spending more than 5 to 10 minutes on it, and then just get under the bar. And yeah, like most of the time people feel like they need to do it. I'm like, yeah, if it feels good, spend like this X amount of time, And I do think that letting people feel good when they go into training might have a placebo effect. But when it comes to me, when it comes to actually having pain, right? Like, oh, this hurts. I'm like, dude, right, cool. Let's see what happens after a deload. And usually if they have a deload and if they're having some pain, I'll just like maybe drop the absolute load a little bit more than how I would on a regular deload, and they come back to me and like, cool, I'm good now, right? Or I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of pain now. They say, oh, how many hours did you sleep last night? 4 hours. Cool, right? Let's try sleeping more on your deload. Let's rest a little bit better. Oh, I'm good now. I'm like, dude, like I literally didn't do nothing. I said, let's try all of this first before you go and spend money doing something else. So that is in general how I feel. I think a big thing, like I said, is self-efficacy. And I do think that most people think that pain is like, oh my gosh, the world is ending because I'm in pain, right? I do think that pain comes with anything, right? You play sports, you twist an ankle, like that's way worse than whatever you are doing, But if you're having chronic pain, then it goes beyond my expertise and I usually refer out then. But if it's just an acute thing that tidies itself up, I'm like, cool, right? Perhaps it's not as bad as you think. My goal is just to help people not to catastrophize things way too much. And I guess impose on themselves like self-limiting beliefs because of like thinking about pain way too frequently. I think there's research out there showing like the more you think about pain, the more likelihood it's
like a paper cut. You get a paper cut and all of a sudden like you don't think of it as like, oh, it's not painful. But then when someone tells you, oh, your hand's bleeding, you're like, oh fuck, I'm in pain. You're like, yeah. Like I think it's literally a paper cut. Like you're fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of this like, I mean, there's placebo as well, and there's like nocebo, a lot of like interesting research on like phantom limbs, like how people who literally amputate off their arms, but they still feel like pain on their arms that are actually not there, like the nervous system is a very complex thing. And I do think that my expertise is beyond that. And like I said, if I can't, I just refer out. And but most of the time, the reason why maybe foam rolling works for you is because it helps you chill out a bit, like you just lie down like a potato on top of the foam roller, and then you're like, oh, I'm a little bit more relaxed, and then your nervous system is a little bit like less jumpy and that cool. I don't feel as much pain. Maybe you're just more relaxed, after work and all of that. So,
and
some people people like the feeling of it. It's like if you like it, that's like another thing. People are like, oh, he's foam rolling. I'm like, if you want a foam roll, fucking go for it. I couldn't think of anything worse than lying on a piece of pipe on the ground. Like that shit hurts, but some people like that feeling. So
yeah.
If you want to do it,
I guess it comes back all the way to like that initial start of the podcast, right? We talk about buy-in, and I think if people have this preconception of like foam rolling is going to increase my performance by 100%, and I'm not going to care what the research tells me because I know that. I'm like, okay, and I tell this to everyone, like I am not going to go and foam roll, but if you think and you feel that it's going to help you put 20 kilos on your squat, fucking go for it. I gotta care less because all I really want is if you can get a 20 kilos extra on the squat, if you think the foam rolling can, and if that buy-in is so big that you think like, if I take a foam roller away and you can't squat, I would much rather give you the foam roller. I'm just going to suck it up. And like you're just going to hit PBs every day. I'm like, cool, do what you need to do.
I mean, in a powerlifting sense, our goal is to get people stronger. If it gets them stronger, then you've got to have it in there. It's like I said, being having some humility about it.
100%.
Only WADA approved strength though. Only approved by WADA.
Only WADA.
Other than that, we can't. So thank God. Like, so if you really want powerlifters to stop foam rolling, just get WADA to ban it. So
well, it could be. You never know it is that effective. But like like going off what you said, Sean, like if you get a new client and they're like, oh, like you talk about their warm-up protocol, and they're like, yeah, I'll foam roll for 20 minutes. Like, the first thing you say to a client, like even me, like I am against it, but I don't like to preach that too much.
I'll say,
I'm not going to
say like, hey, can you do 10? Like, don't do it. You do less.
But I'm not. The first thing I'm not going to say to someone is like,
exactly.
oh,
take something out just because I don't like it and I don't.
I'm going to be like, oh, well, research suggests that it's actually a placebo-like effect, and you could get the same thing from just lying on the ground without the foam roller. I'm not going to say that. I'm not a fucking dickhead. Like if someone likes it, like I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm just going to like, cool, good on you, go for it. Maybe once we establish a relationship and there's further down the line, and then maybe we can have a yarn about it. But like you work with enough people, you coach enough people, that you shouldn't do shit like that. Like
don't be stupid.
Don't like you don't become a successful coach by saying stuff like that to people.
Yeah. And that's a really good segue to some quick fire questions that we generally do on this podcast. Well, I say we generally do, but we've got a couple here, and that's a very good segue for you, Jason. So the way that we want to do these quick fires is basically we don't want you to, unlike you, we want it to be short, sharp, and sweet.
You don't want me rambling?
No rambling. That's the whole point.
Damn,
so,
bro.
The first two main questions came through, and these are all very related. So I just compiled them into two major ones because we're running short on time, which is fine. Fuck, marry, kill. Squat University, a foam roller, or a lifter that doesn't crop their videos.
Ooh. Ooh. That's so hard.
So what is it? Fuck, marry, kill.
Squat uni. A foam roller, or a lifter that doesn't crop their videos.
Well, I would marry the foam roller because it's a unanimate object, right?
True.
So you can live with it forever without it giving you too much grief.
Okay.
I would. Oh God, I'd have to kill. I'd have to kill Squat U. Sorry, that guy adds nothing to the fitness industry. I don't. I'm not even afraid to say that. And I would marry the person that doesn't crop their videos and be super disappointed in myself.
Next question. 10 words or less. Why do you hate hook grip?
Oh, 10 words or less, Jason.
Woohoo!
Whoa. I'm just going to give you one word. How about that? Variability.
Oh, well, there we go. Those two big questions.
All right. And to end,
And it's not stronger than mixed grip. Shit, I just used all my words.
Yeah, you're lucky it's at the end of the episode, so I can't kind of like fight back. But nah, usually when we end the episode, we talked a lot today about like mindset, like coaching, programming. I think the crux of the matter is kind of like challenging belief, self-efficacy. So if we take it all back to square one, right? What mindset do you think a lifter can adopt that you think would benefit his or her performance in powerlifting? So yeah, if you take it all back to square one, what would your answer be? And after that, give yourself a plug on where people can find you and stuff like that. And your answer cannot be hire yourself as a coach, because that is already obvious, right? So that's the obvious answer. Let's give you something a little bit less obvious. Yeah.
So I think if everyone trusted their bodies a little bit more, I think actually kind of what you said, Kedrick, is really important. Not catastrophizing anything. Like if you cannot catastrophize, I think you are in for a fucking awesome powerlifting career. I think the people that do this sport really well have a very even mindset. They don't get too far ahead of themselves when they have a bad session. They don't get too far ahead of themselves when something hurts. And they do a very good job of just kind of trucking along no matter what. There's a lot of people that a bad prep, a bad session, a pain here or there, like it throws off their training, derails them for months on end. I think if you can take a bit more of a even mindset and just kind of not catastrophize, I think that would benefit a lot of people. And I think that's probably something you can actually extrapolate into other things outside of powerlifting.
Right. So let the listeners know where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on Instagram, Jason V Clarke _ I think PPS.
I don't even know.
I think it is. I don't know.
I'll plug it in the show. I'll plug it in the show notes somewhere.
Something like that. But that's probably where most people contact me, and you can watch some, as Kedrick's already pointed out, very mediocre lifting. But also come check us out at North Shore Barbell at 65 View Road, Wairau, and we have a website, northshorebarbell.co.nz, where you can inquire if you want to join up. So join up and come hang out, because I can guarantee you that's the best place to do powerlifting on the North Shore.
Right. Thank you very much for the time. And it's an honor to have you on our podcast. So for all the listeners out there, that if you like this, share, subscribe, give a thumbs up on whatever platform you are. And yeah, thank you once again, Jason, for your time. Hope to have you back maybe sometime in the future for another yarn and more rambles.
Cheers, boys. Appreciate it.